welcome to Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the Apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. I'm your MC, Rich, and I'm joined by Mark Diaz Truman of Magpie Games, IGDN, and Indie Plus. Hey Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey Rich, pleasure to be here.
Cool. Now, Mark, you have got a ton of Apocalypse engine games in Magpie Games, so I'm curious, how long have you been playing PBTA games?
Oh man, it must have been, I think probably 2012, I think, was when I first played my first Powered by the Apocalypse game. I was working on our Last Best Hope, and it was this game about ending the world, and I heard from some people, oh, you should play Apocalypse World, and my first instinct was like, oh man, somebody already did this. And then I read it, and I was like, whoa, wait, what? No, this is like nothing like what I'm doing. And in fact, the first time I read it, I was like, I don't get it. Like this, what is this book? I don't even understand what this book is. And I was at Gen Con at 2012, and Travis Scott, who's, has run a lot of Apocalypse World.
Right.
I'm not sure where he started, but he sat me down. I was like, we're going to play this. And we played for about 2.5, 3 hours. And true to form, it was like a super unsatisfying play experience. Like, well, we just built all this cool stuff. I played a hard holder named Vega. And we had a couple of cool scenes. And I was kind of like, man, I really want to play that character more. But there's another part of my brain that was like, holy crap. Like, that's totally different than anything else you have ever experienced. Like some like alarm bell went off, and I went back and I was like, I guess I'm going to run this thing. And it was like 6 or 7 times of running it before I really grokked it. I would like run it and my players would be like, this was fun. And I'd be like, no, this is terrible. I don't know what I'm doing. What is this? What is going on? But like that alarm bell kept going off all the time. Like, this is something big, right? That was huge.
Nice. How much rereading of the rules did you go through, or was it mostly learning at the table?
I found the rules kind of unhelpful the first time I read them, and I think it's because I was expecting, I was a trad gamer for a really long time. I played a lot of, like Werewolf the Forsaken or Vampire the Requiem kind of stuff where, the book is not necessarily doesn't tell you how to play, right? Just is more setting stuff. Right. And so I read Apocalypse World, and now in retrospect, I'm like, man, why didn't I read that like 4 more times? Because I just would go to the table and be like, I'm going to try to make this work. And it would be like juggling chainsaws and being like, ow, right? And then, one day, it was actually a Monster Hearts game, actually, just because I was doing something different. So I think I got out of my zone and like really pushed it. I ran a Monster Hearts game for a couple of friends, like half gamers, half not gamers. And one of the not gamers, my friend Laura, was like a big fan of the kinds of games. And she like just got it in a way that helped me get it. I was like, oh, yeah, no, that move would be perfect. And so I made that move, and I watched the whole thing just clicked and came together. And then when I went back to Apocalypse World, it started to be this smooth, like, cool, you move, I move, like more like a dance than me trying to make something happen. And that was, I think, where it's kind of flipped over to like, okay, now I'm ready to like do something with this and try to design with it.
Nice. Which
is a kind of curse that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, because once you start to try to design for Apocalypse World, it's like, welcome. I always think of Othello, the little Othello game. When I was a kid, we had an Othello box from like the 70s, and it said on the box, a minute to learn, a lifetime to master. And I feel like that's what Apocalypse World design is. It's like, oh, it's just moves. You just write moves, and you're like, oh, this is easy. Here's my moves. And somebody who knows what they're doing is like, no, these are terrible. Let me show you the 15 ways these don't work. And you're like, whoa. Like, I'm going to have to take this to a whole nother level just to make it sing. And then you get started on a game, and it's like, well, this is 5 years of my life or 4 years of my life to take it from conception to execution.
Nice. Well, I did not think you were going there with an Othello quote. I thought you were going to whip out something by Iago. Or
No. Just, I remember that box, the green and white box with the 70s font, minute to learn. Like, as a kid, it kind of blew my mind. Like, a lifetime. Like, like an 8-year-old, you're like, a lifetime, right? Nice. What would that even mean to an 8-year-old? So.
Very cool. All right. Well, let's switch gears here. We're going to jump over to Read a Sitch. Read a Sitch. All right. In Read a Sitch, what we do is we talk about stuff that's happening at one of our tables. Now, there's one thing that you brought up, Mark, that I would definitely want to dial in on, which is in Powered by the Apocalypse games, how do you MC that game when PvP happens at the table without losing players or hurting feelings? And let's try to move past just, hey, let's have a social contract and hey, let's talk to our players.
Right.
How do you keep things moving without it breaking down in a PvP situation?
So in those first 6 or 7 sessions where I started to make things happen, one of the last sessions had a moment in which the hardholder decided like, okay, I'm going to take our entire hardhold on basically a pilgrimage to this really crazy site called The Wreck. There was basically like maybe an alien spacecraft, maybe something from another dimension. And when you got close to it, your teeth would hurt, right?
Wow.
It's one of my favorite like PBTA or like Apocalypse World things. I drop in a lot of games. It's a lot of fun. And he was like, we're all going to The Wreck and it's going to love us and accept us. And one of the battle babe was like, no, that is super crazy. No, that's not what we're doing. Right. And the battle babe pulls out a gun and goes aggro. And I had that moment you're talking about here where you're like, well, shit, like everybody's about to have hurt feelings at this table because we're going to fight. And yes, everybody here is here for the right reasons and we'll debrief afterwards or whatever. But I just kind of trusted the system and said, okay, let's go with this. And I think one of the things here about a well-designed Apocalypse World game or PBTA game is that PvP hopefully is acknowledged by the system, even if it's not explicit. And the GM can actually do a lot of damage by trying to like intercede and get in the way. So if you go aggro, who gets to make the choices? Well, it's actually the other PC.
Yeah.
Right? Like you go aggro on the PC and then the other PC gets to make the choices. And so like that's actually a really difficult thing to grok when it's just about to happen. Mm-hmm. You're like, okay, PCA has pulled a gun. You have to remember that on a 10 plus even, it's PCB that gets to make a decision.
Right.
Right. And then when PCA says, well, look, we're not going to the wreck. I'm going to shoot you if you decide this is what we're doing. And PCB says, shoot me. Fucking I don't care. Shoot me. Then PCB has done some like calculation in his head. He's like, I can take this much harm. My gang is around the corner. Like I'm willing to do this. And so you have to kind of trust that the players are going to do their thing. And the worst thing the GM can do in that first moment is try to like get in the way of that and be like, somebody comes into the room and you don't get to do what you wanted to do. Right. That's a very tempting move. So step one is trust that the system has got your back here as a GM.
Right.
That like there's going to be roles and then people are going to make choices. And if you respect those choices, people are going to feel pretty good about the decisions that you made because you honored their intent and their agency.
Right.
The second thing is that you have to be really careful with spotlight. So since there's no rounds in Apocalypse World, or, most Apocalypse World games, let's just talk about Apocalypse World and Monster Hearts and Urban Shadows, the basic core, right? Those games don't have rounds. So you're like, well, what do I do, right? Like PCA gets to go. Does PCB necessarily get to go? And for that, the core of games that's been developed for the last 5 years, Dungeon World, whatever, like none of them have rounds that tell you, okay, now hand it off. So that's your number one job as GM. It's not to stop the fight. It's not to tell them how to fight. It's to measure the spotlight. So if PCA gets to make a move, PCB should logically get to respond unless there's some reason that they wouldn't, right? Like, PCA shoots PCB, PCB says, cool, makes the harm move, gets knocked unconscious. Like, well,
yep.
Sorry, dude. Like that's what happened. You got knocked unconscious. Where do we go from here? But if PCB takes a bullet in the chest, then it's time to kind of turn to PCB and say, just straight, basic GM stuff. Hey, you just took a bullet to the chest. Turn to PCA. PCA, you still coming? PCA says, yeah, I'm still coming. PCB, what do you do? It's almost like the key here is to remember the PCs are like doing the work for you. Mm-hmm. Like you don't have to come at them with anything in that moment because the first PCA is doing the work of putting the pressure on. And your job is to kind of stand back and go back and forth. I think that those two things, like trusting the system and adjudicating spotlight, are really easy for me to say in the abstract, but in practice, it requires you to be really cool, like really hold steady, let the PCs kind of take their time making decisions, and then respect the agency of those decisions. And then you have to kind of see, do I actually want to let these two kill each other is a different question than do I want to let them fight?
And you mentioned in harm, you talked about, well, they go unconscious. Well, that's an MC choice, right? Harm is on you as the MC.
That's totally true. Yeah. That's a good point, right? So in that situation with the battle babe coming at the hard holder, I might pick you knock him out. And then I say, okay, Battle Babe, so the gang is right outside. They're already knocking down the door. They're already coming after you. What do you do? And the Battle Babe might say, like, I put 2 rounds into the heart holder's head. Cool. But then the gang's I'm just going to offer a choice with a consequence. If you do that, 30 guys are going to be on you, like, now. And you just killed their boss. They're probably not going to be very happy with you. And if the Battle Babe goes, oh yeah, that's a good point. And what actually happened in the situation we had was Battle Babe got some shots in. The heart holder got his gang involved. The Battle Babe took a bullet or 2 and then was like, you know what? I don't want to fight 70 guys. You want to lead your whole crew to the wreck? Peace. I'm out. And like bailed on the situation. And so then I'm kind of adjudicating like, okay, you have enough time to do that. Like go ahead and make your move to see, can I stay cool under fire and get out of here? And the 2 PCs very beautifully like clashed and then retreated from that clash, right? Like they're both powerhouses. They know they're both powerhouses. They're going to run into each other and then walk away, right? But if you get to that point where, one wants to kill the other, you have to be really thoughtful. Like, am I respecting the agency of this player by knocking them out? Probably not a good move if like the 2 PCs are coming to the end of a really long story where they've wanted to kill each other for a long time. The first move gets made and you say, you get knocked unconscious. And the first PC goes, I kill him. Like that sucks. That's just lame for everybody.
Yeah.
So you got to keep the context in mind too. Like, what is this fight about? And what choices are you making to hold steady around that environment of the conflict? Is this a lethal conflict? Then don't knock somebody out or make their job easy, right? But if it's not a lethal conflict, then it's the right thing to do to maybe knock someone out, push somebody off a ledge, like create some tension in the situation beyond we're just going to sit here and punch each other in the face until one of us is done.
All right. That's great, Mark. Thanks for walking through that one. And now we're going to open our brain. Open your brain. What we're going to open our brain up to today is Mark Diaz Truman is going to talk about Urban Shadows. Now, Urban Shadows is a game that you've co-designed with Andrew Medeiros. Mm-hmm. We know that it's an Apocalypse Engine game, but what's the setting? What's the elevator pitch for Urban Shadows?
We always say that Urban Shadows is a political urban fantasy game powered by the apocalypse, meaning that it's a game about cities, about the people, monsters, cultures, tensions that exist in cities, and how they play out in a sort of dual way, both as a metaphor, like the wizards are moving into an area to take it over for a particular ritual, and as also as like a real, like, there's gentrification going on and people who live in poor neighborhoods are getting bought out by the rich folks who want to move into that area. And what that does for us is it opens up a really cool space where we can talk about race, gender, religion, community, culture through a lens that's not like a bummer, like, oh man, let's talk about oppression, but instead is like a fun, cool intersectional experience where your monster, human, depending on like what you want to play, is knee deep, ankle deep, I mean, what do you say, like neck deep, I guess, even in debts, corruption, the dark side of the city, and just enough hope to feel like you can bring it all down and make the world a better place if only you can keep your head long enough to stay in the game. So it's often like, vampires, werewolves, ghosts, fairies meets The Wire. Right? Like that's the kind of the magical, ice cream sandwich we make between, popular media.
Yeah. You so beat me to the punch on that one. I was going right there. I was like, is this World of Darkness through the lens of someone who mainlined The Wire?
I think it's more Harry Dresden for someone who mainlined The Wire.
Yeah.
In the sense that World of Darkness is all about conflict within communities. How do vampires treat other vampires? And what we're about is actually about how vampires treat werewolves, how vampires deal with the tensions and conflicts within their community when dealing with the fairies and werewolves and people in their lives that they have to manage. For example, each playbook in the game is a different type of supernatural creature or different archetype for a human. So, for example, you might play a vampire, the vamp, or you might play a wolf, or you might play a fairy, but you might also play an aware, which is a person who knows that the supernatural exists and they're getting deeper into it. I always think about like Veronica Mars as being kind of like, someone who's an investigative journalist kind of character,
yeah.
Or someone like Wesley from Angel, who's like, he's no fool. Like he knows that there's a supernatural world and he's going to do things. You can play hunters, obviously, but also you can play a veteran who's somebody who used to be awesome back in the day, who's now retired, like Whistler from Blade or, the Equalizer from the Denzel Washington movie where he plays like an ex-CIA agent. And of course, when you're playing a character like that, you get drawn back into the game, right? You get pulled back. That's the whole point of the playbook.
Yeah.
But those human archetypes help to flesh out the game. So it's not just monsters. It's about people and the monsters and fairies and demons that they know.
What are some mechanics in Urban Shadows that are different from Apocalypse World? What are the ones that you like the most?
Yeah, I always joke that Vincent designed the perfect game because he looked at how people play games and he wrote a setting that matched that. We don't have to care about human life in the apocalypse, post-apocalypse. So if people treat NPCs poorly, like, whatever. That's Rolf Ball. He's a dick. I don't have to care about him, right? How do we get the PCs talking to each other? Well, there's only 100 people left alive, so they're going to talk to each other all the time. So I always curse the sky when I'm designing, and I'm like, oh, that's why Vincent did that. One of the challenges of Urban Shadows is that there are, 3.5 million people living in the Baltimore metro area. Mm-hmm. If you got 5 PCs, how do you keep them in context with each other? Like, how do you keep them coming together over and over? So one of the big distinctions is that you have debts instead of HX. Debts allow you to call in favors from the people who have you've done things for in the past, and they can call in favors for stuff they've done for you in the past. So if the wolf, for example, does things like is usually muscle for someone, they'll have a debt on that person. They'll say, hey, man, I backed you up when those demons wanted to do a deal and you wanted to bring somebody to the party who, could fight them off if they've tried something funny. When the werewolf has problems, he can go to the wizard and say, hey, I did you a solid back in the day. I know we don't have a very tight relationship because we're from different communities, but you owe me. So I want you to get mixed up with what I'm dealing with right now. And so the GM has a tool, both that the PCs can use, but also that they can use as NPCs, because NPCs hold debts too, to keep people engaged in an environment that's much bigger, much broader than Apocalypse World, because a city of 3.5 million people is like 100 million times bigger than a Hardhold because of all the connections between the people that live there.
Nice.
The cool thing about debt, I think, and Andrew and I, it was one of the first ideas we started talking about, was that it really reshaped the game away from spending a resource like a string or having a stat like HX that kept the relationships sort of, this is how they are, they're not changing very much, to a really shifting, like people trading debts, using debts to get what they want. Like it's an ever shifting set of alliances and relationships that reflect modern life rather than post-apocalyptic life.
Yeah, I do like how the factions will shift in how they are not, like they can be very positive towards one player character and very negative towards another. Some of that is history. Some of it is what's actually happened at the table. And that I like that mix.
Yeah. I think that's the other big innovation, is that rather than try to describe every relationship as individual, we have 4 factions: mortality, night, which is like vampires, werewolves, ghosts; power, which is like wizards, oracles; and wild, which is like fairies and demons. And each of those factions can be represented by a stat that you have in your character sheet. So if you go to someone for help, like say, I'm going to go to a demon I know for some help with this problem, you actually roll, like, let's find out what happens when you go to that demon. And sometimes you get there and the demon sold you out. And sometimes you get there and the demon's like, oh yeah, hey buddy, what's up? We love you. You're great. You're a good guy. Here's some stuff. Here's some information. And that sort of slices and dices up that, again, millions of people into a manageable set of relationships for the PCs. And that's where Andrew and I spent just a ton of time working, was trying to make it so that each game of Urban Shadows had the players constantly running up against each other, as opposed to running 5 separate games where each, the vampires off doing this with vampires, wizards off doing this with wizards, and nobody's really talking to each other.
What is your favorite move in Urban Shadows and why?
Favorite move, definitely beyond all others, is Let It Out. We had such a difficult time trying to figure out how to deal with supernatural powers. So like if you've got a vampire and you've got a werewolf and you want those two to each have unique supernatural abilities, but you don't want to tell the players, hey, this is what your vampire can do, right? We want to leave it open so that one person's vampire can be, like Blade, walk around in the day, do whatever stuff they want to do. Some people are like Angel. Some people are like, Edward Cullen, I guess, if that's your thing, right? Sure. You want to like sparkle away, my friend, sparkle away. Then how do we unify the supernatural powers, right? And we came up with this idea that you have basically like a supernatural power button called Let It Out. Is that when you let it out, roll with spirit, And on a 7-9, or on a regular hit, you mark corruption, and you get one of several options that are all like about extending your supernatural senses, or like taking hold of something vulnerable. So if a vampire wants to rip a car door off, then he doesn't roll to rip the car door off. He rolls to let out his vampiric powers, right? And the cost of that is usually corruption. It's this degradation of your soul. You become less human and more vampire. And if you hit a 10+ though, maybe you don't pay that cost. Maybe today you've got control of your powers instead of them having control of you. And that little leak of corruption where you just pick it up sometimes ends up being really foundational to the game's long-term play, where people find themselves slipping to being like, whoa, I've done some things I'm not proud of, and my soul is starting to become up for grabs. Like, I'm no longer who I thought I was when this campaign started. And that's that play to find out what happens core. And it's not in whether you beat people up or whether you figure out their political machinations. It's whether you're willing to let out the darkness, let out the supernatural thing that's inside you.
All right, well, I want to get this thing onto the table, man. Do you think maybe you could run me through a quick scene? Let me see how Urban Shadows plays?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. It is time to act under fire. Now we're in Act Under Fire, and Mark is going to run a little bit of Urban Shadows for me. Just a quick scene, a taste. You got a love letter prep for me already, don't you, Mark?
I do. This is for your sort of podcast PC Plussy, right?
Yes, right. That's right.
It starts, Dear Plussy, the last time we saw you, you were dishing out a fierce beatdown to the demon kin that were trying to front on your turf. Once they saw you rip through their leader like a chainsaw, they took off with threats to come back. Of course, you spread the word that you're getting ready for their weak shit. Ain't no one gonna take your territory without a little blood getting spilled. Mm-hmm. Or a lot. But demons have a habit of not listening, even when what you're saying is in their best interest. Let's see how well your warnings were heeded. Roll with blood. On a 10+, they're still lurking in the shadows, but they respect your turf. Tell the MC what you did to mark the edge of the territory that they respect. On a 7-9, they're making their move, but they couldn't be more obvious. Tell the MC how you catch them unaware. On a miss, they make their move when you least expect it. Tell the MC how they catch you between a rock and a hard place.
Nice. All right. Well, it turns out that Plussy happens to have a +1 with blood, so let's give that a roll. Oh, man, with a +1, I rolled a 9, so that gives me a 10. They're still lurking in the shadows. They respect my turf. What I did to mark the edge of the territory is I'm just right on the edge of a park, right? And I've got a basement apartment, like a little flat that's kind of underground. And I just grab, let's just say I grab like a half dozen of spray paint cans, and I just write my frickin' symbol on a couple of the burned out buildings and, all the compass points. So there's no doubt. It's just like I peed all over around because I'm playing a wolf, and Plussy has just marked his territory, and that's what they know.
Awesome, man. Cool. So yeah, when you're out patrolling your territory, looking around, do you patrol every day? Is it like an everyday kind of occurrence that you're out there patrolling and walking the edge of your territory?
Man, I'm pretty diligent because I've been having some encroachment with these demons around. I can't mess around. So I got this convenience, like, mope job and working at a convenience store. I don't care about it. And I work that during the day, and at night I go out and I keep an eye on my stuff.
Awesome. Cool. So you're out kind of checking out one of your symbols, and we see one of the demons kind of come up to the edge of the territory. And, he's a small kid, Asian. He's got a hoodie on, and, he sees you and sees the symbol, and you don't even have to say anything, right? You see him sort of text something and then kind of like retreats. But as you're watching him go away, you see a car around the corner. It's actually, maybe a car you know. So let's put a name to a face. This is one of those things I talked about in terms of getting to build a city, right? Rather than just having the post-apocalypse. We're going to find out if you know this woman who's pulling up next to you in the car. And you're going to try to put a name to her face as she pulls up next to you and rolls down the window. Go ahead and read Put a Name to a Face for me.
When you put a face to a name or vice versa, roll with their faction. On a hit, you know their reputation. The GM will tell you what most people know about them. On a 10+, you've dealt with them before, learned something interesting and useful about them, or they owe you a debt. On a miss, you don't know them, or you owe them. The MC will tell you which.
Great. as she rolls down the window, you see that she's an incredibly beautiful, probably Middle Eastern woman, long black hair. She's wearing a set of sunglasses, even at night, right? I mean, cause it just looks so cool.
Yeah.
And her car is this like Lexus Audi thing. I mean, you're not a car, fuck cars, right? Like, it's just a beautiful car, right? And as she rolls down the window, you get a good look at her. So go ahead and make your roll.
It turns out that Plussy with, well, I don't know what her faction is, but I got
she's from the Power faction.
Oh, Power. All right. I've got a +1 with Power. Surprise, surprise. Oh man, that is a 4 to 4 +1. That is a 9. It's a mixed success.
Perfect. Cool. So on a 7 to 9, I'm only going to give you just like what other people know about her or what you've picked up from maybe a light conversation. If you had a 10 plus, you get a little more, but you just know who she is. You don't have a relationship with her yet. Okay. So this woman is, let's say, she actually goes by Gruber, Julie Gruber. Even though she has, this very Arab, Middle Eastern appearance, she has this German last name. You're not sure what the deal is with that. She's widely known in town as like an oracle who works for some of the bigger wizards in town. Like she's kind of a lackey, right? And as she looks up at you, she takes off her sunglasses and she has these really striking blue eyes, almost like in the movie they would be computer aided, right? Like they're so intensely blue.
Yeah.
And she says, Mr. Plussy, yes?
Yeah, you're Gruber, right?
Yes. A pleasure to meet someone who is aware of the situation.
I've got a big Louisville Slugger bat, and I got this crappy glove that I picked up. It's actually a kid's glove. Like, it wouldn't even barely fit my hand. The glove will not fit. But it's enough so I could say I was going out to a practice if some cop rolls up on me. So I just throw that over my shoulder and I walk over to her car.
Yeah, she looks at the bat kind of, you see like a little hint of a smile coming over her face. And she says, I believe a mutual friend of ours has recommended that I seek some of your services. They prefer to go unnamed, but they told me that this, and she kind of points around and then stops, like her finger points directly at your symbol.
Nice.
It's like this is your territory, yes?
It sure is.
Well, it's my business to see things and know things. And in this city, things change. Perhaps this is a moment of change for you. Are you interested in change, Mr. Plussy?
I'm interested in learning about what change you propose, Mrs. Gruber. What is this unnamed friend? And I'll be honest with you, I know all the names of my friends.
Great, cool.
What do they want?
You're looking at her pretty intensely. Are you actually trying to figure her out? Or are you trying to figure out like what's going on?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure I
Cool.
mean, she's an inscrutable, freaking blue-eyed, beautiful oracle lady. But yeah, I'm gonna figure her out.
Great, cool. So go ahead and read Figure Someone Out for me.
When you try to figure someone out, roll with mind. On a hit, hold 2. On a 7 to 9, they hold 1 on you as well. When you're interacting with them, you can spend your hold 1 for 1 to ask their player, which would be you, a question.
Yep. And there's a bunch of questions here. Let's go ahead and just roll, and then we'll figure out which ones you want to ask.
Excellent. All right. Turns out I have got a mind +1. Oh, man, just barely made it. Rolled a 6 with a +1. That is a 7. That means they hold 1 on me as well. Is this a full hit? So do I get 2 or just 1?
You do get 2. This is a big difference, I think, between Apocalypse World and Urban Shadows. In Urban Shadows, you always get 2 questions on a hit, but you give yourself away, right? You give something about yourself away in order to keep things rolling.
Nice.
So do you want to ask any questions now, or do you want to continue the conversation?
Yeah, let's continue the conversation now, and I'll sneak in the questions. Yeah, that sounds great.
Great. Okay, cool. So she says, look, there is no friend. It's my business to know things. I wanted to know you, and now I do. If you would like to dispense with pleasantries, then I would suggest that you get in the car and the two of us go somewhere more private. And she asks, what can I do? She's going to spend her hold. Mm-hmm. How could I get your character to get in the car and go with me?
She can tell me, because I know she works for a bunch of wizards. She doesn't do anything on her own, from what I know. So she can tell me who, and this is my question, who's pulling her strings.
So as long as she's honest with you, you'll get in the car.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, you can look at her and you smell a particular cologne on her. I mean, you're a werewolf, right? So you smell things, no problem. You smell a particular cologne that you've only smelled once or twice before, and it belongs to a man that you only have seen or heard of before, named Dominic Zoo. Okay. And you know of him because people will tell you, oh, this is Dominic's place, or, he's a well-known wizard in the area. You've never met him, so you can't put a name to a face here. You don't know him. I'm saying it is a matter of the fiction. You do know of him though, and you recognize his scent. It's in the businesses that he owns around here. Mm-hmm. It's around the people who say they work for him. And you know absolutely that she works for him, right? And she says, I'm here on behalf of Leslie Sanchez. She's found herself in a dire situation, Mr. Plessy. She needs someone to find her daughter. She's gone missing. And of course, when something goes missing, then a wolf is what's needed.
Yeah.
Nose and all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Julie, let's cut the shit. You're not down here for yourself. I mean, maybe you do want me to find somebody, but Dominic, you're his errand girl. So what's really going on here? Be straight with me.
She actually is taken aback a little bit, right? Like you could tell that just for a moment she kind of cracks that facade and recognizes she's been found, and she laughs. Of course, Mr. Plessy. Dominic, yes. My employer. He does want you to find someone. I'm sorry for the earlier obfuscation. It's not clear whether I can trust you yet.
That's still not clear.
Well, I don't suppose it's going to get more clear. But you're right.
I'm not working for somebody who can't even be straight with me, so you find some other stupid wolf who'll believe your lies. All right, Julie?
Do you turn and walk away?
Yeah.
Okay, great. She actually, for just a moment, there's a look of, as you turn away, you see that she's very worried, right? And she actually, puts her hand outside the car and is like, wait.
I'll stop.
I'm sorry. Dominic doesn't like it when I mention his name. I have no intention to mislead you. But I do require your services, and I do need you to find someone. My brother is gone missing. Dominic has authorized me to expend resources to find him. I'm not here for him. I'm here for myself. But in order to find my brother, I need someone who can go places I can't.
All right. That's a story I can believe.
Cool. Do you get in the car?
Yeah, I'll walk around and get in the car.
Okay, awesome. Good, cool. So I think that's just before the break, right? Commercial break kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? You get in the car and close it. She rolls the window up, and the whole thing is lit up blue and red, right? Like the panel, everything, the leather on the seat is just really luxurious. And she puts the sunglasses back on, and the two of you drive off into the night. And, we find out, is she even telling the truth? You don't know, right? She could still be lying to you. But yeah, you drive off into the night to pursue this lead.
Nice. That was great. Thank you so much, Mark. I really enjoyed getting a chance to play Urban Shadows. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Cool. And thanks for coming on Plus One Forward. Thanks for carving some time out of your day with all those Kickstarters you have to fulfill where you raise thousands and thousands of dollars, man.
Well, I'm glad to play, man. It's funny because when you're writing a game, you're playtesting. And then as you mentioned, when we're trying to ship games, we're write and ship. So it's fun to have just even a few moments to play together.
Plus One Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community and Richard Rogers. You can find us on gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at GauntletRPG. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and McGay Baker. The music for Plus One Forward is from the Savage Oral Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko Metal version and Process. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Oral Hotbed on their website, savageoralhotbed.com.